looks like my iPad. I just ruined it today or yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went to pick it up out of my bag and it was like,
Oh, no.
yeah. I didn't drop it. It just put pressure on it and it went
Yeah.
spidered. It's like, great.
It was a Disneyland mishap.
Yeah. off the ride.
Off the ride.
Oh, yeah, of course it did.
Do you mind saying for the microphone your name and your affiliation to
Sure.
the project?
My name's Jeff Wamester. I'm the director for Green Lantern Blue Armor Power.
Well, take us through the process. This is obviously a very important character to a lot of us.
Yes.
You take it very personal. How personal is it to you?
Well, it's funny because I'm a little bit older, but I grew up on a lot of Bruce Timm films, so being able to tell these kind of stories, especially with Jon Stewart, who didn't really have a history, so you see him on the Justice League, you're like, who is that? What is he? What's his past? You're like, he's really cool, but what does it mean? And it never really was like exposed or talked to there. I mean, it was in the comics, but for us to do something on screen and unique was an awesome opportunity. I really enjoyed that, and one of the things I like doing is the reason I got into comics and animation was creating stories and how these things come about and what motivates them to do what they do. It is the most fun to me. So to have the opportunity that with a huge character that's in the WB or DC catalog was a super exciting opportunity. So that's for me personally what I loved about it.
As a director for this film, what approach did you take to highlighting certain nuances that only Jon Stewart or that he could bring to this film?
I think the thing is like he's a unique character, and I was telling them over there too, is like we want to make sure we differentiate what kind of hero Jon is versus what Hal is, right? Hal is a kind of a wisecracking, cocky guy, right? And he shows up, the ring comes in, ends up in his finger, he's like, okay, and he goes be a hero, right? And he kind of is cocky all the time, but Jon isn't that. He comes from a different history. He has other ways of handling stuff, and he has other considerations in his life to how he's approaching that. And when he walks in and he gets a ring, of course there's reluctance to it because he's been through this 1,000 times. He's seen the worst of what it can offer. It's laid at his feet, and he's like, I don't want that again. He's like, I know what that means, And the story tells the story of like how he goes from there back to feeling, seeing the reason why he has to do this. And hopefully in the story we show what kind of person he is, from just running into a burning alien ship and saying, there's someone in there, I have to save them. That even though he's seen all that, he still makes that decision without thinking about it. And we're hoping that kind of starts from there and we see why it switched. He went all the way by the end and what it meant to him. So have that opportunity was really cool to show that character and show something that we've never really explored in the animated universe versus the DC universe.
How was it also, since it is animation or animated, how did you work with the actors?
Usually the way we work with actors is it depends on what crew you have and what your considerations. The way me and Butch kind of approach it is we want weight. We want them to have a chance, the actors have a chance to bring weight to these characters, bring consequence. That's something we've been doing so far with stuff like Wonder Woman and Tomorrowverse, or not Tomorrowverse, with Man of Tomorrow. It was like, we want these characters to have consequences for the decisions they make and have weight so that the character can feel that, the audience can feel that weight. So when we approach the people doing the reads on this stuff, we're like, no, these characters are serious about it. We're not looking for a cartoon version of it. We're looking for a live action kind of like consequence driven kind of way of reading that stuff. So when we approach the actors, we choose ones that have that in their capability, but also when they come to it, sometimes it can get mustache twirly with some of the evil characters. We're like, no, tone it down. We want this character to feel like they have a reason to do this and it's real and it means something to the audience. so when we approach this, we talk to each one of those artists that way, and usually when they come in, they get it. And there's a couple of people that we've had before, and they're like, oh no, we're Butch and Jeff, we know what they want, and they hit it. Some of the guys will really have to bring them down because they're like, oh no, you don't want me that far, you want this far, and then they'll bring it down too far, and we bring it in to the right range. That's usually what we do, and it only takes a couple of reads. Wes Gleason, our voice director, is really good at interpreting that for us as we work through the process. So it's a lot of fun doing that because a lot of the story gets figured out right there. I mean, you read it, but once you see hear the voice acting, you start seeing the scenes in your head. And you're like, sometimes it even gets changed on the fly. We're like, we hear him take a read, and we're like, wait a minute, I know how we're going to do this scene. This is going to work better. We're like, hey, can you read it more like this? And they're like, oh no, okay, I see where you're going. And we all start seeing the movie in our head. That's when it really starts getting told. So a lot of decisions are made right there in the booth.
Good.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the voice being very important in the visualization.
Mm-hmm.
Does any aspect of the actor get put into the character? I mean,
Themselves as a person?
yeah, like the movement or, like that kind of...
Yeah, sometimes it depends on the kind of actor, because some actors, they'll be very physical.
Yeah.
Some actors are just like, they're not physical at all. And so sometimes if I know an actor's coming in and I'm like, oh, they're a physical person, I can grab some of that stuff, I'll actually tell them, hey, is it okay if I record you? I'm going to use it for the directors. Sometimes we don't because they don't do anything, Yeah. Sometimes I watch very carefully because I'm watching how they move, and I'm like, okay, that's going to influence me when we get to the boards, and I tell the board artists, okay, here's what I kind of want you to do. When I get back, if you didn't hit it, I'll go in and move it around to get it to that point. But yeah, voice actors, everything from the way they look as a person, the way they hold themselves, and sometimes even the way they would act at something, we take from that if we can, if there's time. Sometimes they move and they're very much like this, and their voice acting, you're like, how do you do that without moving? Some people are like, yeah, and it's really big, and you're like, oh, that's great. That might be too big, but yes. That's the general idea of what we're trying to hit. So yeah. Any other questions? I'm here for 7 minutes.
What was it about Green Lantern that drew you to this project in the first place, aside from the obvious?
I think the big reason is that he hasn't really, his history in animation hasn't been told, and I having the opportunity to bring that to the screen, I love doing that part of it. I get super excited about being able to, especially, I mean, all the characters have been told, like so many of them been. To have the opportunity is rare these days, so when we run into it, you're like, yes, let's do this. I think that was the biggest thing to draw, was being able to do that on a character that I didn't know the history. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know it from Green Lantern, and from the from Justice League when Bruce Timm was on it. That's not something that was really explored at all, and I think we got the opportunity to do that. That's huge.
The comics can change the TV show can change the movie can change the comic. What do you think this movie is going to change in the comic as far as the character, or what's its contribution to the character going to be?
I think the idea of having PTSD and the idea of having a hero who's reluctant, to take on something that's serious like this, will paint his every decision going forward, and it did in this, and I think it will play a part. That could be taken from ego saying, it's more of just saying like, yeah, that's a wrinkle I don't think has been really explored on a character, especially him. Like, we have lots of them that have Batman could be seen as that, but Batman's different. Like, he's in the fight because he's like, I want more, I don't care how bad it gets. I'm defending the light no matter what. This is different, John Stewart's the kind of person that selflessly will just say, I don't care who's there, I'm going to stop him. Oh, wait a minute. What about all these other consequences that come around it? But he accepts that because that's something that he just is.
And he keeps dramatizing himself.
Yeah, and he has to deal with it. And that's why I think it's cool, because you're like, oh, now I get, if you look at Justice League, the original, that's why he was so serious all the time. It had a serious tone about everything. That's where it's coming from. And it's cool, it's not a purpose, but you're like, yeah, it makes sense. It comes together in a very creative and sensical way, I guess is the best way to put it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.